All right. Well, hi, hello, and welcome to Finding the Right Platform for Modern Workloads, Essential Questions to Ask Following the VMware Acquisition. Now, today's webinar is sponsored by Nutanix and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Jess Steinbach. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I'm so happy that I get to be your moderator for this conversation today because I'm guessing that some of you out there might be feeling a little overwhelmed as you try to answer that question right there in the top of our webinar here. How do you how do you evaluate, how do you implement the best platform that is going to meet all of your workload needs? And that checklist might be a bit long. You're thinking about performance, you're thinking about scalability, you're thinking about cost reduction, you're thinking about flexibility, security, compliance, all of those good things. All of those are on your must-have list. And if you've been struggling a little bit to find that platform that is going to meet all of your needs, maybe feeling a little overwhelmed by choice or just kind of going through that evaluation process, because I know it's a lot. So I get that. Here's some good news for all of you. We have some answers here today. We are going to chat with an incredible team of experts who are going to help teach us a little bit more about a solution that is simple, cost-effective, and consistent. Who doesn't love that consistency, right? For all of your application deployments from core to edge to cloud. That is a lot to cover. We have a lot to get into, and I know that you are ready to get into that good stuff. So I'm going to zip through just a few of our important housekeeping points and get us on the way here. Now, I want to start out with the questions window because this is going to be an important part of our webinar today. The best part about coming together into one of these webinars is the opportunity to ask questions directly of experts like we have here with us today. So if you have those burning questions you've been rolling around, you really want to dig into, today is the day to get them out. So make sure you get those questions in, and our speakers are going to be watching the questions as they come in. They'll be adjusting their flow and responding to you. We've got some poll questions, so it's going to be a very fun and interactive day. So make sure that you are comfortable with that questions window. In fact, right now, we can give a little bit of a test run. So if you haven't already done so, say hi, say hello. Let us know how your day is going. I saw we had some tornadoes for you, Scott. I'm so sorry about that. I hope everything's okay. Boy, exciting times in Missouri, it looks like. Hopefully all of your days were a little less exciting than Scott's and there were no tornadoes, but let us know how your day is going. And throughout our day today, if you have any technical issues, that questions window is also going to be the best way to reach out to our team. I do want to remind you all, and you all know this by now, but a browser refresh, quick little browser refresh is going to clear out most of the usual issues that come up with a microphone or a slide, something like that. But if for some reason a browser refresh has not worked, shoot us a message in that questions tab and the Actual Tech Media team will be there to help you out. We promise. We get it. Those tech gremlins sometimes get a hold of you. So we're here to help if you need us. All right, so that's the questions window. The next place that we're going to stop on your tour today is the handouts tab. Please do click in right now. You'll see some awesome resources and takeaways to go along with our discussion today. And I know you're going to want those for later, so make sure you visit that handout section. It is not just cool content that we've got for you today. We also have a $250 Amazon gift card as a prize drawing, and we will be giving that away at the end of our webinar. Now, you do need to be here in live attendance during the webinar in order to qualify to win that gift card, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you're not sure what those T's and C's are, no problem. We have them listed for you in the handouts tab that we were just chatting about. So click in the handouts tab, scroll in, and you'll find the full terms and conditions for you there. All right, now I have one last piece of important information, and hey, it involves a prize. So I know you'll all be excited to see this, but the best question gift card today is a $50 Amazon gift card going to, you guessed it, the best question asked in the entire webinar. So we are going to take all the questions asked. We're going to look at all of them after we wrap, which means that even if we do not get to your question live today, you are still entered to win that best question gift card. So get those questions in because you will get my unending appreciation and gold stars and high fives, and you could potentially win that $50 best question gift card. So that's just win-win for everybody. So get those questions in, my friends. All right, well, that is it for all the housekeeping, and I think it is about time that we get our incredible speakers on out here with us because they have a ton of information to go through with us today. We have so much in store and I cannot wait to get started. I am so very excited to introduce you all to our wonderful speakers here with us today. Greg White, Senior Director of Strategic Marketing at Nutanix, and Aaron Delp, Cloud Native Marketing, also at Nutanix. Let's get the dynamic duo on out here with us. Hey, Aaron. Hey, Greg.
Hey, Jess.
Hello.
All right, my friends. Well, I know you've got a ton of content and things that you want to get into with the audience, but before we start, we're flipping the script on them and we're starting out and making the audience give us some information. Audience, what plans do you have, are you considering in response to VMware acquisition by Broadcom? And I'm curious, while the audience is answering this, Aaron and Greg, what would you expect to see from our audience today?
So I think it's going to be a little bit of everything. I've talked to a lot of customers here, oh gosh, in the last 6 to 9 months on this topic, and there seems to be a pretty broad scenario of potential solutions that are out there in the market. And I'm predicting it's not necessarily any one thing. How about you, Greg?
Yeah, I echo what you're saying, Aaron. I think we may see some. I have seen a fair amount of really trying to figure it out right now. So they may not know which one yet, and so hopefully we'll help answer that question today.
Yeah, that's a great place to start it. A little bit of uncertainty means that there's lots of conversation to be had. Let's show them their results here. All right, so looks like fairly evenly split with a little bit more heavy towards we're waiting to see the impact. So that's kind of in line with where you guys thought that would go.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly in line with conversations we're having with customers today.
Okay. All right. Well, we have one more question. That was your warm-up round, folks out there. So you've got one more poll question here. What are the biggest hurdles that you anticipate in adopting your risk reduction plan? This is a multiple choice, so you should be able to select multiples. So it's okay if the answer is all of them. Aaron and Greg, Aaron, we can start with you again. What's your prediction?
I would say so. So here's the biggest thing, and I actually come from a VMware background, worked from a VMware partner for over 4 years. A combination of skills and a little bit of what I'll use the term stickiness, right? Like once you start using it, it's not necessarily easy to move away. You really need a really good business case and use case for all of that, and that's certainly part of what we're going to be talking about today.
All right, Greg, what do you think? What's your prediction?
Yeah, I was thinking people have a lot of investments in place, and so I'm wondering how the budget thing will play out in this poll. People are going to be trying to figure out what they do and how they handle what they've already got in place. When would they make that inflection from a budgetary standpoint? So that's kind of my thinking.
Yeah, it's a fantastic
It's always
point.
top of mind. It's certainly somewhere near the top three, if not in the top three. Let's see what the results are. So yeah, looks like we've got budget kind of pulling ahead a little bit, but then pretty evenly split across the rest, and certainly a good mix of all, which is great. Are you guys going to give us some solutions here as we go through these hurdles today?
That's the plan. That's the plan.
Perfect. Well, I think without any further ado, let's get into that, because I would like some advice on how to solve those obstacles, those hurdles. So, Aaron, I'm gonna hand things on over to you.
Absolutely. So thank you, Jess, and thank you everyone out there for taking the time today. We really, really appreciate your time, and certainly we see some questions already coming in. We really would like to see your questions as well. Now, as we mentioned, both Greg and I talk to customers about this and many other topics. I cover cloud native and AI in addition to this. And there's really some great questions and essential questions, I think, when we're designing this. And what we want to really do is dig in deep into what are some of the possible questions you should be thinking about with something like this. Now, before we go into that, though, there is kind of a legal disclaimer around all of this. And I'm not going to read this to you. Don't worry. I'm not going to do that today. I promise. But what I will do is give just a couple seconds for everyone out there to take a look at this and make sure we all adhere to this today. And with that, I'm going to move on. Now, I think that really the best way for us to start is let's talk about some market trends, specifically around what we call modern applications. But to set the context for everyone, when I say modern applications, I mean a lot of times containerized applications. If you hear the idea of containers, if you hear about Kubernetes, in VMware language, it's going to be talking about Tanzu and the Tanzu platform. What are we looking at today from an industry trend standpoint? Well, There is a bit of a tipping point, and for those of that have been in virtualization for a long time, there was always the physical to virtual, and at some point in the industry, those lines crossed, and we had more virtual machines than we did physical machines. Well, we have, depending on which study you look at, either we're approaching or have crossed that from virtualization to containerized applications. So think of this as almost like the next generation of infrastructure. So here's some stats both from IDC and Forrester. 65% of organizations have some kind of containerized application in production today. In addition to that, 50% or more have already containerized. And this is probably something that I think is a key differentiator and something I really want you to pay attention to today. This whole concept of stateful applications and stateful containers, because if you followed containerization in Kubernetes, it started out as ephemeral. Now, ephemeral meant it didn't save the state. The container just goes away anytime, doesn't matter. Well, more and more, we're looking at stateful applications. Now, the container may be ephemeral and may go away at any time, but that state of it needs to be saved somewhere, typically in some kind of database. And this is especially as we move forward into kind of the age of artificial intelligence and AI and ML. This is also becoming something that is increasingly necessary and something we're definitely going to be talking about today. And then, of course, observability and analytics. That is another area of how do we really troubleshoot and do root cause analysis of all of this at scale. If you're out there today as either an infrastructure admin or a Kubernetes admin, this is probably top of mind for you as well. Now, I'm going to pick on Kubernetes though. I think it's safe at this point. By the way, last week, Kubernetes had its 10th birthday. So Kubernetes as a platform or as a technology is 10 years old now. It hasn't gotten any easier, like not even a little bit. And it is complex and tends to evolve very fast. And it has a certain amount of demands of the infrastructure that is underneath it. So if you look on the left there, the legacy infrastructure isn't built to handle the resource demands of Kubernetes. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look at virtualized platforms, typically you cared about the hypervisor, the compute, the storage, and the networking. So you had four big elements and you stitched them all together and you had a virtualized environment. And those virtualized environments tend to stay decently static. Kubernetes is not designed that way. It is designed to be dynamic. Things are spinning up, things are spinning down. And the infrastructure it expects to be rapid and resilient underneath it to take care of all of that. If I look at the middle, it's when I say it's complex and it's deep, if you will, we'll look at the release cycles. Kubernetes is on a 3 to 4 times a year release cycle. So that means there's always a new version coming out. And that has been a challenge for a lot of organizations. How do you keep up with this version? How do you make sure you're not getting too far behind in Kubernetes releases? And again, how do you start to manage this as an entire ecosystem? And you're going to hear me talk about this term multiple times. Cloud operations. How do you achieve cloud operations out of infrastructure today? Well, the first step towards this, I'm going to kind of give you a teaser into this, if you will. Certified interoperable solutions. Don't just work with all of the open source projects that are out there. Make sure you get a solution that is enterprise class ready and something that is ready for this containerized revolution in AI and ML and everything else that is coming. So what you want to do is choose something that is a certified interoperable solution going forward. But in addition to all of that Kubernetes complexity, there is some uncertainty out there in the market. Oops, I went one too far. Hold on one second. I'm just going to draw these out here. And the whole idea here is, again, goes back to those polling questions we talked about initially. There's a lot of folks out there that are just trying to figure it all out. There's a lot of organizations, and maybe you're one of them. You're taking a more conservative approach to all of this. You want to wait and see what is going on. And that makes perfect sense for a lot of environments that are out there. But if you're also in the situation where you have virtualized environments, that are already in place, maybe potentially very large virtualized environments that are already in place, lots and lots of VMs. And you're either dipping your toe in the water for containerization, or you're already moving forward with a containerization plan. You need a platform that handles both of them seamlessly and provides enterprise class data services. And that's what we're really going to be talking about today, is how do you do all of this in a cloud-like operating manner? And what questions do you need to ask, and what answers should you have with all of that? And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg here. Greg, what are some questions for everyone to kind of think about at a high level as they get started?
Yeah, I'm excited to go into this. One thing I was thinking about while you were talking was that complexity in Kubernetes when it comes to scale. Like the things I've heard, and I just wondered if you hear the same thing. Is I can kind of figure it out if I want to do one app, but once I want to do a lot of apps, then that complexity really grows exponentially, right? And do you see that sort of thing too?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll even add one more. And it's something we're going to go into. What does an application look like in a containerized world? Because it's not one container. Like, it's not like virtualization where one VM or a couple of VMs might be an application. Containers are microservices. They're little bitty pieces of that application. So an application may be 100 containers. It may be 1,000 containers. How do you stitch them all together and say these containers are an application? And that's something we're going to talk about.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is jump into some things to think about when it comes to the VMware side of the changes that are going on. And so this are some questions, some advice. It's come from discussions with analysts and with customers that we talk to as well in the market. So a big thing to start out is really figuring out, your current situation. What's your exposure? What products are you actually using? How much? And so then that will allow you to look at the impacts of some of the new pricing approaches, this approach that VMware is taking to do more bundling, kind of limit the number of offerings. But it ends up resulting in maybe some different usage patterns than you're used to. One of those big areas is to really look at vSAN. So that's has changed to more of a capacity-based licensing approach, where you get some amount free with each bundle, but then you have to buy on top of that. And so if you're using vSAN, this is a good one to really look into, because there's a potential impact there. Like we saw in the polling, looking for what are some alternative solutions that maybe you might want to try out and bring in some diversification into your environment. And then the big one, really is, like we were talking about kind of in the beginning there, is what kind of investments do you have in place right now? Typically, with all technology changes, a lot of the times it starts with the greenfield first, and then when the existing investments, like say you've got your SAN that still has a year of life on it, you're not going to necessarily always go replace that right away. You might be ready to do that, but if not, can you run a new solution, side by side, while you kind of keep that investment where you're getting your return on it, but you're not really putting more into it. You're not increasing your exposure with it. And then there's obviously really looking at, have seen a lot of people look at taking on longer term ELAs while they just buy them some time to figure out what they're going to do. So there's some opportunity to negotiate there. And then just be ready for, like Aaron was talking about, and we'll be going into more a little later. Make sure that the infrastructure you've got is ready for these big new inflections in the market with containers, with Gen AI, with analytics, with this whole app evolution. And so what we've got is really a framework to help you think about some of these decisions. And we found this to be very useful as we've talked to organizations in the market. And so most of the things that we're hearing are these organizations, people like you are looking am I going to diversify my environment, bring in some other technologies, try out new things so that I have more options should things continue to be uncertain or change? Some customers are saying, I'm just ready to migrate and do something new. And that could be migrate, as a virtualization, or this could be migrate from VM to containers. And what's the approach I want to take there? We've also found some customers using the cloud as a way to do that diversification. So they may not be ready to buy infrastructure. The great advantage of public cloud is being able to rent for a period of time. You may not want to rent forever, but it's a good way to get started, try things out, and then you could help set your direction without making a big capital investment up front. And you may have credits with some of those cloud providers that could be useful in this way as well. And so what we find is an organization will pick one or multiple of these strategies. And then what we do is try and help them think about how they can apply them. And what we call it the 3 C's. It's constrain, construct, and convert. So just a framework for a way to think about how you can approach this uncertainty. You may want to limit your exposure to further cost changes over time. So like I said, you may just kind of ring fence your existing SAN infrastructure, what you've got going, and then put anything new you construct on new infrastructure. And so that opportunity to bring in the software-defined, server-based approach, like hyperconverged infrastructure, we'll talk about from the Nutanix perspective, we have some options when it comes to hypervisor choice there. And then the convert piece is looking at some of the workloads. You might say, hey, I still do have a year or two left on my VMware ELA, or my agreement for what I've got in place, but I could take some dev tests, take some edge environments, some new sites, even my DR, and put that on something different, so that I'm testing out and trying new options while I'm continuing to run my existing piece on vSphere if I need to, while I take advantage of that investment. So just a framework for you to help think about this, and some questions to go through the process. So I just wanted to share a little bit about Nutanix and how we can help. Our goal is to help provide choice, and what are some of the things that you would need to know about Nutanix to be able to evaluate whether you wanted to use Nutanix in your diversification or migration scenario. I always like to start out from a customer perspective. We've been around over 10 years. We have over 24,000 customers, running every business critical app you can think of, whether that's on VMs and, as Aaron was talking about, increasingly in containers and in cloud native. And really our goal and our vision is to make this hybrid multi-cloud simple and cost effective. And so when we say hybrid multi-cloud, we mean edge, on-prem, public cloud, service provider clouds, and multiple, but doing that all with a common operating model. So it's a single platform, same operations in any of those places for any of your apps. So it's really this one platform to run your apps and data anywhere. And one of the great things that is part of our platform is we have an integrated hypervisor called Nutanix AHV, and it's built on KVM. We have optimized it for the performance of our platform. We've removed some of the pieces that you don't really need, and we have made it very secure and easy to upgrade. So one of the great things is a thing we call one-click upgrades, and it automates the pieces in the background. And so that allows you to keep your security up to date very quickly. And then the management of all of this is integrated into the Nutanix platform as well. So you have this enterprise-ready solution validated by hundreds of solutions, as you see there. And it's a virtualization option, but you need Nutanix to run on it. It has to run on AOS. It doesn't run by itself. But this is an option that I just want to make sure everybody was aware of, because not as many people know about this as something that they could use. And so if you think about that convert scenario, maybe I want to have my vSphere licenses running on-prem, but I want to do DR to another site, and I don't want to buy more licenses from VMware for that. I could run that on Nutanix on AHV. We have a very easy way to convert from one to the other. But like I said, if you want to run vSphere, it runs great on us. If you don't know, we won Best of VMworld a few times in our history. And we continue to make sure we've got the good integrations built into that to provide that choice, which is really one of the big things that ways that we help customers is this idea of choice. We want to bring the option for hypervisor. We have options for server choice, and we have great OEM partners. We have a Supermicro Nutanix branded version as well. But you can pick the server that you're best aligned to and that best meets your needs. Plus, you can run us on Azure, on AWS, on the service providers, all with that same common Prism is what we call it, the management interface. But it's a common operating model across all of that, and you have the choice of what works best for you. That platform, like we said, does VMs and containers. It provides file, block, and object support, storage support. And like we said, it can be on-prem, at the edge, and in the cloud. And the simplicity, the one-click, the identical operations is something that our customers really value and get a lot of return out of, which I'll kind of talk about here in a minute. And then finally, our mission is customer delight. So we have had a long history of strong customer satisfaction and net promoter score that really highlights the love that customers have for us, and this idea that we're really trying to make things easy so that organizations can focus on their business. And so what does that mean? What are some of those kind of benefits that we see? This is we ask IDC to go interview our customers and find out what kind of value they saw when they switched to Nutanix. And so here's an assortment of metrics that came back from those interviews. It's like a very detailed hour-long interview. They go into a lot of different areas. So it's cool. It shows it's not just, great TCO from this management simplicity, from this ability to scale incrementally over time, that return. But you also see the operational values, more efficient management, less unplanned downtime, and then business value as well, being able to generate more revenue or have more productive application developers. And so these are just some of the things that we see, and the ability to bring in value for organizations so that they can focus on, what they need to do to drive their business instead of focusing on their infrastructure. And so hopefully that's helpful as a little primer on Nutanix and what we do. And with that, let's really dig into the container piece and how we can help in that space, because this is a kind of complicated thing to get into, like you talked about. So hopefully we can help make it easier. So I'll hand it to you.
Yes, absolutely. And before we do, actually, we've had some questions come in, and I think now is because it's like a good logical breakup, right? We talked about Nutanix and Nutanix of the company at a higher level on our value prop. So some of the questions that came in were specifically about that. So maybe we could address those right now, and then we'll knock out some more questions at the end as well. So Greg, I'm going to put you on the hot seat here. So Scott asks, will or does Nutanix have educational and government pricing? I'm assuming they do.
Yeah. We have basically a dedicated vertical business to education and government, and they have price lists and those pieces in there as well. I'm trying to think of those various price lists. I know there's FedRAMP and there's some other ones as well, but we can definitely have dedicated resources to your vertical that could help you out.
And by the way, just so everyone knows, Greg used to lead that team. That's why I asked him that question. So another question for you. Mark asks, has Nutanix seen an uptick in interest And has Nutanix ramped up to handle the potential influx of new customers?
Yeah, great question. Great question. If you saw our latest results, we're growing in the 20% range year over year. So we are seeing that growth. We have predicted that it would be coming, so we have been hiring for that. I don't remember the change in employees year over year, but I do know we are growing our teams to go along with the growth that we're seeing as a company.
Fantastic. And I'll take one more, and then we'll move on to the next section. Jeffrey also asks, can we start with the community edition and apply a license to it after we have migrated from VMware and learned Nutanix? Okay, so I'll take this one. But first of all, what is community edition? Because we haven't talked about that at all. So community edition is, think of it as almost like a home lab version or a version to get started and kind of kick the tires and understand Nutanix. Now, what it does is it's free. It's a free download, can get going, and it's a nice way to really get started and try it. Now, it has its own release cycle and certified hardware list. Because of that, to answer the second part of that question, the licensing and just moving the licensing forward isn't necessarily as easy or something that would be supported. But the migration of the workloads that you create on CE to a production cluster is something that could be handled seamlessly with no downtime. So, Jeffrey, if you have any additional more complex questions about CE edition, just let us know in the questions there. So with that, I'm going to move on to cloud native in the cloud native section. Why cloud native? First of all, because again, as I mentioned, some of this stuff can be pretty complex at times. And this is where Nutanix really does solve a lot of things. This is where this whole idea of taking that scalability that we talked about, the legacy infrastructure doesn't scale nearly as well. And the whole idea of making that scalable infrastructure on top of it invisible. And when we say that, what do we mean by invisible? Well, that means it is handled by, say, the Kubernetes, like, say, Red Hat OpenShift, for instance. If you are doing infrastructure level tasks, you don't necessarily need to do them at the infrastructure level. You can do infrastructure management through API calls, maybe through infrastructure as code tooling, such as Helm or Packer or Ansible, for instance. And so this whole idea of cloud operations that pulls together that it's both scalable and invisible. But here's the key advantage. I keep coming back to this: built-in data services. Nutanix bread and butter historically has been enterprise class data services for virtualization. And we're pulling that forward into the containers world. And it's not something a lot of other organizations in this space are necessarily doing or focusing on. How do we make sure, whether it's volumes, files, or objects, or whether it's even a database, how do you put the proper tooling in place to make those built-in data services? And that's something where we actually have some slides specifically around that. Now, everything I'm talking about is a little bit about simplification, and I'm just going to build this out for simplicity right now. Number of benefits, and I'm actually going to start at the top left instead. Faster time to value. Faster time to value is all about taking the advantages of cloud and bringing them on-prem and combining that with the application level data services that we talked about. Instead of hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands of containers managing things at the application level. That enables this cloud operating model because of you have this simplification and unification in the top right-hand corner. You have less risk, whether it's doing infrastructure as code, whether it's doing automation, whether it's handling the environment through a tool higher level in the stack, if you will. This whole idea of doing less operations manually from a console saves time and reduces risk as well. And all of that, of course, is better efficiency. And that efficiency can come through in a total cost to the company, a total cost savings to the company. Maybe it's in infrastructure services, maybe it's in people and resources as well. Next question. So That's great. Isn't this conversion to Nutanix really hard? Um, I will simply say yes. There is this conversion that is always going to be complex, right? And we had this same conversion from physical to virtualization, virtualization to containers, and then even from VMware to another solution in the industry. Now, here's the thing to think about, though. There's lots of considerations here. And again, I'm not going to go through all the ones on the screen, but what you want is a tool and a platform that simplifies and unifies this as much as possible. It removes the burden from you and makes the migration to the platform as seamless as possible. And this is where Nutanix really comes in. I really like this statement, conversion made simple. And why would we say something like that? Well, again, we haven't talked about it as much, but with Nutanix Cloud Platform, whether it's virtualization or whether it's containerization, you're moving onto the platform, you're doing it one time. Let's say you want to move on-prem. That is certainly an option. And then once you're on-prem, we have cloud clusters. So we have the ability to the exact same resources, tools, management, everything in AWS or Azure as well. So this simplifies operations. It gives you application workload portability, one-click migrations, and therefore minimizes downtime as well. And another one to think about too is because everything is in the same platform, that bottom right there, pre-seed data days or weeks ahead of time and just do a quick cutover. For us, VMware folks, again, I come from a VMware background. Think of it almost like a vMotion, right? What did vMotion do? It basically took the VMDK and it moved it from this place to this place. And then when everything got really, really close, it did a cutover, right? And so what we're doing here is attempting to do minimizing downtime by doing those kinds of capabilities, but across locations as well as across storage or clusters as well. Now, what should you look for when building cloud native apps? Here's one of the biggest things I would say. Again, I've kind of been bagging on Kubernetes a little bit here, of saying it's complex, that it's really hard. Here's how you make it simple. If you're familiar with Kubernetes, you're probably familiar with the CNCF, the Cloud Native Compute Foundation. They have something they call the landscape, and it is basically, here's all the buckets, categories, if you will. Here's all the projects that are in them. Here's all the vendors that play in this space. Last time I looked, it was 200 plus different options. So it's like build this, build this, build this, build this. Well, a lot of folks, we don't have time for that. We want an application that is certified, that is guaranteed to work together. And that's where things like we have what we call NVDs, Nutanix Validated Designs, or we have partners such as Red Hat OpenShift and certifications that we do with them. And Rancher, if you're familiar with Rancher, is another one in the industry. So this whole idea of making things as turnkey as possible and to remove that complexity from this kind of environment. And I keep coming back to it. Stateful containers, stateful containers, stateful containers. I keep saying it over and over. But this is a key area to think about as you do migrations, especially from virtualization to containerization. This comes into being. How do you containerize those existing applications? And then how do you provide that portability around them? And then also, how do you do disaster recovery and migration as well? We're going to talk about that in just a couple slides. Now, next question I almost always get when I talk about that is, does this mean we're locked in? You mentioned Red Hat OpenShift. Does that mean we're locked into OpenShift? What if we use Anthos? What if we use Rancher, for instance? Well, our mission here is one platform for any Kubernetes solutions. NKE, if you're not familiar with it, top left corner there, Nutanix Kubernetes Engine, so it is our distribution of it. There is also D2IQ, if you're familiar with D2IQ, or sometimes Day2IQ as well. We acquired them recently, and they are also supported on the platform. OpenShift is a preferred partner on the platform. Rancher, very, very common in our customers today. But there's others that are out there. There's Google Anthos. There's open source Kubernetes. There's Amazon EKS Anywhere. There's Azure Arc. This whole idea is pick your Kubernetes. And oh, by the way, pick your vendor below too. Maybe from a hardware standpoint, if you're on-prem today, maybe you want Dell, maybe you want Hewlett-Packard, maybe you want Lenovo, maybe you want Cisco, or if you want to work in a cloud, maybe you want to work in AWS or Azure. This whole idea of providing a platform in the middle that allows an any-to-any kind of connection situation.
Yeah, it's back to that choice thing I was talking about.
Exactly. And it's always
do.
been our mission. And the whole idea of this mission of flexibility and choice, it's really was the foundation of the company. And it's something we very consciously chose to take forward, especially into cloud native and even artificial intelligence applications as well. Now, how do we do this under the covers? I think this is worth talking about, especially when it comes to talking about Kubernetes lock-in. Well, this whole idea, like I use this, what's on the slide there, I'm going to kind of sort of talk about, but I have my own way to kind of talk about this. But that second bullet, mixed node types and hardware generations, that's the key we want to talk about here. When we talk about cloud operations, what is cloud operations? It's that ability to start small and scale. And then think of everything as dynamic pools of resources. I have a pool of compute that I rent from the cloud, or I have a pool of compute that I check out if I'm on-prem and it's reserved for me. Well, what are you doing? If you need more resources in that pool, you make a bigger pool. You can add compute intensive nodes into the cluster. If you need more storage capacity, just add those nodes into the cluster. If you need more storage performance, add those nodes into the cluster. So it's all about dynamic pools of resources that are used for a certain amount of time and then given back to the pool. And again, this is where this whole idea of, going back to Kubernetes and the kind of infrastructure it wants or prefers underneath, this is where legacy infrastructure just doesn't hold up because it isn't designed to be, from the ground up, dynamic pools of resources. Now, what about stateful containers? I've talked about how important it is, but let's talk a little bit about how we do this. If you're familiar with this area, we're going to dig a little bit deeper here. There's many different ways to achieve stateful. There's block storage, there's file storage, there's object storage, and then on the databases, there's SQL databases, and there's NoSQL databases. In the Kubernetes world, there's a CSI driver, and then there's a cozy driver. We don't have the cozy driver listed here, but there is a CSI driver, handles block and file. There is a cozy driver that handles object. And this is all under this umbrella of NUS, basically Nutanix Unified Storage and Unified Data Services. And then there's another product, Nutanix NDB. Think of that as that middleware or that middle layer that will handle database administration and maintenance for both SQL and NoSQL instances, specifically in a containerized environment. So a lot of those BCDR kind of things that we love to talk about and think about, we have you covered, no matter which technology we're using. And then last slide about this. I've mentioned it once or twice, but Nutanix Data Services for Kubernetes, NDK for short. This is how we take that one step further. We could and had absolutely CSI drivers and cozy drivers and NDB. How do you pull all of that together into application-aware container services? That whole idea of these 100 containers are an application. So if I do something at the application level, it knows and intelligently is policy-based. Go take this. Here's what I need to do on it. I need to back it up. I need to migrate it somewhere else. I need to do BCDR on it. That's what this is all about. And oh, by the way, no new tools to use. Again, if you're in the weeds with Kubernetes today, kubectl, kubectl commands. It extends kubectl out there in the industry. So it is basically NDK is an extension of kubectl. So you can simply give the commands. It will go talk to the storage. It will say, this is a policy I want to create. It will say, this is an application that adheres to this policy. Greatly simplifies and really takes that complexity monster of Kubernetes I keep talking about and wrestles it to the ground and gets it under control. And with that, I'm going to close it out with a customer testimonial. And the key thing to think about here is at the bottom here. New options will support our goals of being fast, efficient, and friction-free. That is the word I want you to focus on here, friction-free. I think that all encompasses our entire message today, whether it's virtualization to containerization, whether it's VMware to Nutanix, whether it's somewhere in the middle. Nutanix is all about friction-free operations going forward. So with that, I'm going to wrap up my portion of it, and we're going to take you through some potential next steps. We already mentioned Community Edition, and by the way, there is some, we call it CE. There is some CE questions in there. We're going to get to those here shortly. There's another way to do this. Another one is Test Drive. If you don't even have access to, say an extra server that's around or an extra desktop for CE, you can take Test Drive. Go out to the website, Test Drive, and you're given an environment. You can see for yourself. There's many different test drives. It's not just one. There's an AI ML test drive. There's a cloud native test drive. There's a virtualization test drive. Greg, I know you've been around for a while. What are some of the other test drives that are available? I know there's a good number of them.
Yeah, I mean, they've got one around Citrix, VDI. I think they have some of the cloud management pieces, whether that's self-service, deploying workloads using blueprints, cost optimization. So you can look at chargeback and show back as far as costs. And so those are some of the other ones as well. But there's a whole suite of them there, and we keep adding to them.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So with that, I'm going to cover one other area as well. For those that might be interested, especially for our folks joining us from Europe today, we have our annual conference, .next, coming up in May. And it's in lovely Barcelona, Spain, and over 100 breakout sessions, a number of keynotes. It is a multi-day event. I'm actually going to be speaking there on Infrastructure as Code. I have a speaking session there. I just finished my presentation and handed it in. So I actually beat the deadlines this year, as well as if you want to take trainings and certifications as well. I'm actually going to try and take my NCP, my Nutanix Certified Professional Certification. I'm going to try and take it at the event. And I encourage you to certainly join us. And if you're going to be at the event, we would love to see you, and certainly come to the Infrastructure as Code session as well. And if you use the QR code on the screen there, you're actually entitled to a 25% discount on registration. So with that, Jess, I think it's good to turn it back over to you. What you want to close us out and also potentially take us through questions as well?
Yeah, we got a couple questions coming in that I definitely want to get to. First and foremost, I think that it is strategically important to your chat in Barcelona that you have me there as a moderator. I'd like to throw that out there. So please do take me to Barcelona. But I hope we'll get some registrations for that, because that sounds like a fascinating chat. And I'm going to leave that QR code up just a little bit longer while we get into some of these audience questions. Also, I have to say, I'm so glad I haven't gotten to talk about Kubernetes in a little while, and I miss talking about kubectl. I just think that's the cutest acronym I've ever. It just sounds like a Pokemon, doesn't it?
Yes, completely.
The important takeaway from our conversation today. Okay, let's start with this conversation here, because actually, you know what? This will bring us back, Aaron, really nicely to where we were just talking about the frictionless and this idea of frictionless. And when we're talking about migrations and moving, so we did have a question come in asking if maybe you could give us a little bit more information about how Nutanix could help move from. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's I was. Getting notifications here. I've silenced all my notifications, and yet they still manage.
There's always one left. No matter what, you never get them all.
Sneaks through.
It's like Pokemon. Maybe the opposite of Pokemon. You never get them all.
Yes, exactly. It is the opposite of Pokemon. I don't know why my Teams refuses to recognize when I turn. If anyone can help me turn off those notifications, please let me know. So we've a question here. How does Nutanix help companies move from ESXi to AHV? I'm wondering how you could maybe walk us through how you make that frictionless.
Greg, do you want to take first crack at it, or should I?
Yeah. No, that's fine. I know you spoke a little bit about what we call Nutanix Move, and so that is a free tool that's a part of the platform that makes that the ability to move a workload from ESXi to AHV. So it's just like how we take this approach to simplify and automate as much as we can in the platform with that one-click approach. We do that from that using the Move tool as well. So we have customers that do cross hypervisor DR, for example, because they don't want to license their DR site with the ESX licenses. And so they have that running, and then Move helps them transition that workload over and adapt all the correct settings and everything within AHV. But it's part of that one-click simplicity approach that we bring, and we call it Move.
Perfect.
Fantastic.
And actually, I'm just getting a message from your crew here. I'm going to post the link to Move here in the chat. So if everyone is wanting to check that out, you now have a link. Let me just get that posted to all of you out there. There you go. Now we got it. So go ahead and take that URL that is in the chat window, and you can go check out Move, spend a little more time with that. Anything else you want to say before we get into our next question? Okay, let's keep rocking because we got lots coming in. Wow, you guys have all had your coffee this morning. Will the Mac platform still be supported?
So what I'm going to actually do is, because we have a number of CE questions coming in. And actually, Jesse, you'll see I just populated our chat with a whole bunch of links.
I got all of them.
I would encourage everyone, because there's one question of like, is it supported on Mac? Is it supported on Windows? Is it in a VM? Since there is so much interest in it, instead of handling all of those questions individually, I'm going to send everyone to the links. There's a CE link, which is where you download it. And then there is the CE getting started with Community Edition as well. So between those two links, that should answer everyone's questions. I just didn't want to take too much time with all of those since they were all kind of related.
Because we're running out of time already. I don't know how this happens. Every time we start a webinar and I'm like, oh, we've got so much to cover. Look, good thing we have a full hour. And then all of a sudden we're down to our last minutes. But I did post all those links, so everyone should have access to those. Please do snag those from the chat. And make sure you get those before we leave, because Aaron has answered all your questions with just a couple of clicks right there. How efficient are you? Talk about frictionless. Look at you. All right, let's try this one. How will the acquisition impact the development and support of existing VMware products? Anything changing with that?
I mean, the short answer is nothing changes. I mean, we're still working with VMware. VMware is, of course, strategic partner, and we have a rich history together, and we still have a large user base that we work together with. What we're really talking about today is, as Greg mentioned, there's kind of, different phases and different directions everyone wants to go in, and we want to make sure everyone is just educated on all of the options they have available.
Perfect. I think that's a great place to start. Is there's always going to be change, but you're right there with people, and the good things are still coming. I want to get to this question here because obviously DR top of mind for a lot of folks regarding disaster recovery. Are there features built into Nutanix that perform DR, or is this a functionality that a third party would be required?
Yeah, so I'm going to make sure I answer this or say this specifically in the context of cloud native.
Yes,
because that's my area of expertise. And if you're looking for something other than cloud native, maybe Greg can answer a little bit of it. But yeah, so Greg's like giving thumbs up. So what we'll do is we'll answer it in cloud native context, and then we'll answer it the other ways first, because there's lots in the portfolio. In the context of cloud native, that is specifically what that NDK, Nutanix Data Services for Kubernetes, that would absolutely handle that. So what we're looking to, as again, kind of a quick summary of it, it's policy-based, where you're creating applications from containers, like this is the policy, this is the application. And then what you're doing is taking that and being able to do business continuity and disaster recovery. Could be in the form of migration from one location to another, or could be just flat out, I need to go recover this application in another location, and here's how I go do it. So doing all of the bits behind the scenes to take a stateful application and move that state to another location and then bring that back up is something that would be the purview of NDK.
Yeah. And I'll add on just from a platform perspective. One of the things that we did early on was put in those enterprise data services from a, Aaron talked about cloud native, but from a VM perspective. So snapshots, clones, replication, you can do multi-site, you can do from edge to core, you can DR to cloud, because you have that Nutanix platform running in the same at each of these different locations, whether that's, it could be a hosted data center, a managed data center. When we run in the public cloud, we run on bare metal servers there, and then our software sits on it. And it looks just like if you had it, in a hosted data center. And so that's when we talk about one platform to run your apps, common operating model. But built in are those data services, the replication piece, whether you need, the real time or the near sync or, sync kind of replication. But then, from on the other side, so, all that's built in. Some of the features are licensed and some are included at different stages. So we can, you can get into the details there, but it's all part of the platform. But we do work very well with outside partners. We have a great technology alliances program, companies like Haiku, Commvault, that provide different DR services. We also integrate with, so if that's sort of your preference, you can use us with them. And then the last piece I would say is we have built in what are called DR runbooks. So you can set up what you want to happen with the DR and then test it and make it really easy to do that. And repeatable. So you take a lot of that manual potential for error out of the mix. So a big focus of what we do is providing that resiliency and availability.
Well, I'm definitely taking away a lot of making life easier and simplifying from this conversation today, which are things that I think we all really enjoy in life. So I think, unfortunately, I keep looking at my clock here because I would love to keep going with this, and we have so many questions that we have not gotten to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that all the questions that were asked today get sent on over to your team so that you can follow up with them, because I know that you guys want to respond, and I appreciate it. I'm watching you guys multitask here as you're answering questions over live chat and in our live conversation. So as I said, dynamic duo, a couple of rock stars here. So I hope we've gotten to most of you, but if your question did not get answered, stay tuned because you will get a response back in follow-up. I do also just want to hit one last time, and I'm going to move back over to the test drives as well. I think this is a great follow-up to our conversation here today. Greg, Aaron, is there anything that you'd want to add as a additional follow-up or sort of next step to getting to know Nutanix a little better?
Yeah, the one thing I'll mention is if you are considering switching from VMware, we have a migration promo out there right now, and the web page is in the resources, and there's a link there. There's an opportunity to get a year of software and migration services to make that change. And so if you're picking that strategy, then know that we've got some ways to help make it easier for you to do it and cost effective.
Love it. Aaron, anything you want to, final thoughts or key takeaways or next steps, anything you want to throw out at us?
No, I think Greg covered it all. I think that was absolutely perfect.
You nailed it, Greg. Way to go.
Thank you.
All right. Well, team, I have to say this has been absolutely fascinating. I've learned a ton. I've had a great time with you both. I hope that we get to chat again soon. And I want to thank you for being here with us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jess. We appreciate it.
All right, and to all of you out there asking some great questions, keep those coming, keep those questions rolling in. Like I said, we are going to get responses back to you. Also, check out all the bonus links you now have in the questions tab. So if you haven't clicked on those URLs, make sure you've got them copied over and save some tabs for after we wrap here. But you are also going to want to visit the handouts tab, because that link, as we said, is going to take you to that resource center. Absolutely incredible way to kind of get to know. There's you can dig into case studies, you can dig into the solution, you can get into some sort of testimonials and how-tos. You can book that trial, all the things, everything you'd want to do, all the best follow-ups, all right there in one spot. So that is your one-stop shop for next steps and ways to kind of learn a little bit more. So spend some time with that. So that's the link in your handout tab. You can click on that, takes you directly there, and then you can copy and paste all the links from our questions tab. You got some bonus handouts in the session today, because you all asked such great questions. So thank you for all of that. Well, that is bringing me around to the end of our time here today, which means it is time for a prize giveaway. So we have a $250 Amazon gift card today going to Robert Morrison of Pennsylvania. Robert Morrison of Pennsylvania, congratulations to you, my friend. As always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after we wrap up our webinar, so stay tuned for that. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Nutanix for making this webinar possible. A giant thank you, of course, to Greg and Aaron for guiding us through such an interesting conversation, but especially to all of you. You know, we had some really fun and interactive conversations. Our speakers were able to, change a little bit of their tone or their topic today in order to match what you need, what's important to you. And that's why we're here, right? We want to get you the information that is important to you. And when we're talking about choosing these platforms and getting the platform that is going to be the best solution for you, and especially when there's upheaval in the industry and change happening, it can feel a lot. It can feel a little overwhelming. It can be difficult to narrow in on how to make these decisions. And so being able to come and converse and share your needs and explore what is specifically helpful for you and your organization and learn about some really cool solutions is the way that we can simplify this whole ever-changing world that we live in, and hopefully get you those answers that are going to allow you to take action, to get that scalability, that flexibility, that performance, that cost reduction, everything you've been dreaming of. And as we talked about today, with Nutanix, it's delight, right? I love that. It's customer delight. It's not just, we hope you have a good day. It's, we hope you have a delightful day. So I hope that you're feeling like you've got some ideas about how to remove some friction in your organization. And I hope that you're feeling delighted as we wrap up this webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you again soon. And until then, have an absolutely wonderful end to your day.